Hi class, I wanted to go over a few things from the assignments in week 5. First, in the discussion, which is due on Sunday rather than Saturday this week, the first 3 questions are pretty straightforward, but the last one I wanted to give you a little more guidance. In this assignment, we're talking about Uzbekistan. That's where we are assuming that Juanita is setting up another office. Now, Uzbekistan has been significantly influenced by Russian culture. So we're talking about Hofstede's perspective. Hofstede is a researcher that studied culture, and we want to know what kind of impact culture has had on things at work like appraisal systems, self-managing teams, and systems for gathering suggestions from workers. So I included a little blurb to help you guys, and I identified a website that's going to help you. So first, what you need to know is Hofstede's cultural dimensions. These are things like power distance, individualism, masculinity, uncertainty avoidance, long-term orientation, and indulgence. You should get to know these things, read about them in your text because you're going to need to use them again in your final assignment, your large 300-point PowerPoint presentation. So I have already plugged in Russia, and so you can see where Russia falls on these cultural differences. Very high power distance, somewhat low individualism, masculinity, high uncertainty avoidance. I think in order to answer this question, you're really going to have to clue into the high power distance and the high uncertainty avoidance. Now, if you scroll down, it's going to actually explain what all of these things mean. So you read through the explanation and then you see how things like a high power distance or high uncertainty avoidance, how does that impact things like appraisal systems and self-managing teams. If you're still unsure about that question, let me know and I'm happy to walk you through more. Now your last assignment is worth 300 points, which is a significant amount. It is due by Monday night, so you have a little bit of extra time to work on this, as opposed, well, never mind. It used to be due on Saturday. Anyway, it's due on Monday. And if you have seen the announcement on the course home, I have given you some tips for how to answer this one. Oh, and I should also mention that the case study is on the course home as well. Again, this is an older assignment that came from an older edition of the textbook, and you guys don't have this case study anymore. So the case study, I have put it as an announcement for you. So you will need that for the assignment. And then I've also done tips for the paper. I went through each section and tried to give you some help. So the first point, you're just providing a summary of the case. This is a similar format to what you've been doing with your papers each week. Make sure you identify all the main points of the case. Then the next point is you're going to identify and describe the various cultures and differences that they're talking about. So they're talking about US, Germany, India, China. So maybe consider how Hofstede's cultural dimensions differ from those different countries. So again, you can go back to that website that I provided a link for in the discussion and look up those countries and see how they differ on things like power distance, individualism, masculinity, etc. Now, I think that's a section where people tend to provide a ton of information, but note that that really isn't worth the biggest chunk of points. So include information on cultural differences, but try not to go overboard there because it's really not worth that many points. And the next point, what aspects of the changes at SAP would be most difficult for the German employees and then also difficult for the employees in the other countries. For the German employees, you're really going to use information from the case study here. It goes into detail about what the German employees are struggling with, and then talk about the other countries as well. You might incorporate some of the information from culture here and those differences. That could be part of the difficulties. In the next section, what HRM functions are affected by the changes described in this case. Make sure you're focusing on things that HR does, things like recruiting, training, selection, development, legal issues, payroll, how are those impacted by this company going global. Now the next two sections, last two sections, they're each worth 60 points. So this is where a good bit of the points is coming from, and that should tell you you really need to spend some time developing these sections. So in this next point, you want to recommend at least 3 ideas that the company can use to help overcome cultural barriers. So I recommend having a slide on each concept or idea and really going into detail with research. I gave one example here, something like increased communication. So then follow that up with some research on diversity and communication. So I'm really looking for detail and support on these points. And then the very last section is to propose 3 concrete HR solutions that would improve relations at SAP. So we're focusing on HR here again. What could HR do to make things better? And like I say here, it's very actionable. So in the first section, the prior section is more general ideas, and then this section is what I'm going to tell management. I'm standing in front of them and I need to give them 3 very specific things that they can do to improve relations. It might be diversity training, it might be mentoring. So you're going to go again into detail. I would recommend again 3 separate slides for each HR solution, going into very specific detail with research support of what they could do. Make sure that you are structuring your presentation like a presentation, not like a paper. You shouldn't just copy and paste paragraphs onto each slide. The slides should be interesting, they should be creative. If I'm sitting in the audience watching you present this, I want to be excited, not falling asleep. So visually it should be stimulating. Pictures, graphs, the majority of your information should be in the notes section. That's where you can have paragraphs. That's information just that you would be seeing as the presenter. So make sure you're keeping your audience in mind, and make sure you include a concluding slide that summarizes your main points. Again, this is a big assignment. There's a lot of information that goes on in here. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask at all. I will be around my computer at least tomorrow morning. Probably not the rest of the day, but you can always call me or text me. I'll probably text back a lot sooner than I can call. So text or email is what I would recommend. Don't hesitate to ask me questions. Happy to help.